What was the result of the dispute between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton? Answer: the development of two political parties. Next question. Use the excerpt below to answer the following question. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government. And I did leave out a line, and that was that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, and I wanted to make sure I got that back in there. In any case, according to the Declaration of Independence, if a government denies people their unalienable rights, the people can establish a new government. And that's very important to understand. So I want to make sure that if a government is destructive and denies people their unalienable rights, the people have the right to establish a new government. A question that I left out, and it was the second question, and that is, why was it important to the founders that unalienable rights were protected? Well, they felt that people were born with rights that should not be taken away. And this is an important concept, and let's keep it going. Question number 4. Under the Articles of Confederation, most powers were given to the states. And we went through the simulation when we were trying to agree on a radio station. And in class, we already have the seating arrangement broken up into the colonies. In any case, again, to review, under the Articles of Confederation, most powers were given to the states. Formal changes to the Constitution are called amendments.
It's 10 o'clock.
And so this is very important to understand as well, that amendments are the formal changes that can be made to the Constitution. Next question. All of the following are characteristics of the Great Awakening except an increase in economic stability. And that's one of the terms and names that we just went over in the last chapter, so it's important that we get this down. So when we think of the Great Awakening, we think of religious, and also this idea of equality. But it's saying except, which means not. And so the one that doesn't fit the scheme of things is B. And so we want to X this one out, and this is going to be the one that is not a characteristic of the Great Awakening. So don't let that trick you. And now let's keep it going. Number 7. The system of checks and balances are, as established by the Constitution, is meant to limit the power of any one branch of government, and this is the idea of federalism. And so you have the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. So we have the legislative, the judicial, and the executive, and this is representing this idea of federalism. And again, limit the power of any one branch of government. 1, 2, 3. Now, here we have this flow chart showing the process of how a bill becomes a law. So we are going to draw this graphic organizer again just to review the flow from when it's introduced in the House of Representatives or the Senate all the way down to when it can be vetoed or signed by the president. And again, this is the process of how a bill becomes a law. Number 9, the First Amendment protects all of the following rights except writing a threatening letter to a public official. So if we read through the choices, we have having a peaceful protest against a court decision, attending the church of your choice, C, petitioning the government to change law. So the First Amendment, we want to make sure that you are aware of what the First Amendment is. So let's just open that up and make sure that we can just dig deeper and get some time to use some Google search engines to find the First Amendment and see why this is true of the answer. So we are going to type in First Amendment, and we can even talk it out, which is pretty cool. So I'll do that next, just to illustrate some of the Google skills that you can use. First Amendment to the United States, and there we go. And so the First Amendment to the United States, according to this tertiary source, says here, is part of the Bill of Rights. The amendment prohibits the making of any law respecting an establishment of religion, impeding the free exercise of religion, abridging the freedom of speech, infringing on the freedom of press, interfering with the right to peaceably assemble, or prohibiting the petitioning for governmental redress of grievances. So I wanted to show that feature again, and then let me just go back to Google and show you how I can look up another amendment. So let me press this. Second Amendment. And there we go. Second Amendment to the United States, the right to bear arms. So we see some images there. It's pretty amazing stuff. You know, it's like Siri and a lot of those voice commands. So getting back to the presentation. Number 10. According to the 3/5 compromise, each enslaved person would count as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of taxation and representation. What was the significance of Shea's rebellion? Well, it showed the need for a strong national government. And we read this in Zinn. We looked at some primary sources and saw this in Creating America. And when I speak of Creating America, I am speaking of not that guy, but of this book here. And again, make sure that you put this in your notes before we take this exam. Which of the following best describes federalism as practiced in the United States? The states and the national government share power. Now, this is also important to understand. And let's just go back, 13, and we're going to wrap this up. Which of the following did George Washington advise Americans to do in his farewell address? Avoid entangling alliances with other nations. So I'm going to just underline entangling and ask that you look that up. And I can also just do that in the meantime. And let's look up the dictionary. And entangling alliances. We're going to look up both words to really break this down. And entangling means cause to become twisted together with or caught in, involve someone in difficulties or complicated circumstances. Alliances is defined as a union or association formed for mutual benefit, especially between countries or organizations. So when you combine these words together, you do get an interesting message from George Washington. Which of the following powers is not granted to the United States Congress in the Constitution? Judicial review. Use the excerpt below to answer the following question. It was a feature peculiar to the colonial wars of North America that the toils and dangers of the wilderness were to be encountered before the adverse horse could meet. A wide and apparently an impervious boundary of forest severed the possessions of the hostile provinces. James Fenimore Cooper, The Last of the Mohicans, 1826. American novelist James Fenimore Cooper is best known for his novels about frontier life. And you can hear that. And some of your clues in this document-based question. Let me go back. I'm sorry. is this, it's getting all mixed up here. In any case, for some odd reason, it went all the way to the front. Let's go back to the back end of it, where we are trying to focus and wrap this test up. And it's borrowed from Last of the Mohicans, where Cooper writes about frontier life. And so I wanted to go over some of those vocabulary words that really illustrate why that is our choice and give you a little bit more context to that. So here we go. Wilderness, and also this idea of boundary of forests, sever the possessions of the hostile provinces. So this is really describing frontier life, not describing plantation life, not describing city life, nor political life.